We go. We are live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are live from the Shul of Bozeman. I'm going to take a moment to share this on our social media platforms. Good evening, Rachel. Good evening, Danielle. Good evening, Jennifer. Good evening, Mendel and Chaya. We got 5 people in the room, plus the teacher. That's an incredible. We're definitely making a headway post crazy COVID time. So let me just share this. There we go. It's a great parsha. We're going to have a blast. Just give us a minute here. It's one of Mendel's favorites. Okay. And we are a go. There we are. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are in the portion of Vayera, the 4th portion in the book of Genesis in Bereshis, and we discussed tonight. Well, there's a lot of things going on in the parsha. We're going to begin on page 95. So some background information is important. So in the beginning of the portion, we read about 3 angels coming to visit Abraham and Sarah. The 3 angels were the angel of Raphael, the angel of Michael, the angel Michael, and the angel Gabriel. Gabriel all came to visit Abraham and Sarah and to do various things. Every angel has a role, and these 3 had their role. So Michael's job was to come to Sarah and Abraham, primarily Sarah, and share with them the news that Sarah is going to give birth to a child. At the age of 90, she's going to conceive, and not only will she be able to have a child, but she will be able to nurse that child. It could be an incredible miracle for this menopausal woman in her 90s to be able to have a child and take care of that child. Michael's job is over, the angel Michael. He goes back to heaven where angels belong. Well, there's 2 remaining angels, the angel Gabriel and the angel Raphael. Now, the angel Gabriel came, his job was to flip over, destroy the 5 cities of Sodom, Amorah, Admah, Tzvoim, and Zoyar, the 5 cities that were going to be destroyed in the Sodom and Gomorrah region of Israel, in southern Israel, near the Dead Sea. And Raphael, the angel Raphael, his job was twofold. His job was to heal Abraham from the circumcision, and his second job was to save Abraham's nephew Lot and his family from the city of Sodom and Gomorrah. And so they're now heading, right? So Abraham's healed, Sarah gets the news. God had visited Abraham. Now they're heading to go destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, the 5 states, the 5 villages that are part of this region. And this is where things get interesting. Abraham, God says, can I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? It's not fair. How can I hide from Abraham that I'm about to destroy part of the world, part of the land of Israel, the land that I've given to him? I'm about to destroy it. By the way, till today, if you go to that part of Israel, it's still it's not an inhabited land. It's not an agricultural land. It's a nothing land, that little flat land near the Dead Sea. So God says, I got to tell Abraham. And when he tells Abraham gets upset. Now, let's put things in context. Why would Abraham get upset? Who are we dealing with? Who is God about to destroy? The city? Let's just call it Sodom and Gomorrah, that region. And I know that in America, we have all these, everyone's an expert on biblical stories that fit their agenda. So people all the time use these stories about Sodom and Gomorrah. But the truth is that the biggest issue with Sodom and Gomorrah, just like the biggest issue during Noah and the Great Flood, was nothing but theft. The way they treated other human beings. Sure, there were other misbehaviors, there was other acts of immorality, there was other acts of unethical treatment of others, but the primary thing that really angered God was the way the people of Sodom and Gomorrah treated other human beings. Now, think about it. What were they doing, right? What could garner God such wrath that God should want to destroy the whole region? Right? We're not talking, we'll get to mysticism, we'll get to depth, we'll get to life lessons soon, but let's tackle the actual story for a moment. Right? They had a rule. They had a rule in the city of Sodom and Amorah in that region that if a poor person would come to town to ask for charity, instead of just being cruel and not giving them charity, they did something way worse. What could be worse? They would write their names on their currency, and then they would give it to the poor person. Right? So what happens? You give the poor person money, feels good. He's hungry. He feels like he's going to have enough money to buy food because the people helped him, except their intention was never to help him. Every time he would go with that money to purchase food, no one in Sodom and Gomorrah would sell him food or her food. So what did they end up doing? They ended up dying of hunger because no one would sell them food even though they had the money. When the guy would die or the woman would die, the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, the people of the region would go, and because their names were written on the currency, they would take their money back. So not only is it not enough to help the person, they would literally torment the poor person and torture them mentally and emotionally, thinking that their hunger is going to come to an end, and yet at the end, not even help them. Abraham's nephew Lot, the one who eventually is saved, had a daughter. Her name was Paltis. And his daughter Paltis had the same gene that her father Lot had, that came from Abraham and Sarah, the gene of helping other people. She couldn't stand when she saw people starving. So what did she do? Every day she would take her little jug. She saw one particular poor person. She took a jug that looked like she was going to fill it with water at the well. Really, she would keep food in it secretly. She'd go to the well. The poor guy would wait by the well, and she'd give him the food, fill up her water, and go home. So no one could detect that she was in the middle of helping a poor person. But eventually people discovered that the poor person wasn't dying. Something was wrong. I mean, someone was feeding the poor. What a terrible crime. So they followed, they stuck around, they put agents to see who was feeding her. And eventually they figured out that it was Lot's daughter, Paltis. She was brought before a judge in Sodom. The judge decreed that she deserved to be killed. And all the people living in the cities of Sodom had to watch her being killed. So they never learned from her terrible crime of how do they kill people? You know, the Talmud has a big debate. There's 4 biblical death penalties. There's beheading, there's stoning, there's fire, which means an internal fire. You put a cloth in their mouth and it burns them from the inside. Skilus, Shev, Harag, and Chenek. And then there's a form of choking, of strangulation. And the Talmud has a whole debate which one is more painful, because depending on the crime, right? There's a whole big debate. You know what these sick, twisted people did? They would take a person like Lot's daughter, put her on the roof of a building, paste her body with honey, tie her to the roof, and allow bees to come and sting her to death. That's the people of Sodom. And the only reason I'm sharing the gruesomeness of it, because it leads me to my point that I'm eventually going to get to, which is, how does Abraham fit into this picture? If visitors would come to Sodom, if they were short, they would, sure, you need a place to stay. We have a place for you to stay, Motel 6 Sodom. And if they were short, they would give them a long bed. And they would get into their bed at night and say, oh, you're too short for this bed. We have to stretch out your legs for the bed. And they would literally stretch their legs. If they were too long and they put them on a short bed, they have to chop off part of their legs. This is the great place of Sodom. Right? We're coming up on Halloween. This all sounds like a monster type of demon, ghostly story. But this unfortunately was human beings doing this to other human beings. It says that when Eliezer, Abraham's servant, came to Sodom, they offered him a bed, but he knew their reputation. It's like, I ain't going into your bed, right? You know, people that don't go into hotels until they check online. We have a friend, Matis, who won't go to a hotel until he checks online if there's any reports of bed bugs. I said, you know, you're setting yourself up for failure, because you're going to be missing a lot of hotel opportunities. But the point is, Eliezer was smart enough. He's like, I'm not going to go into this place and take a bed. So he said, you know, since my mother passed away, I decided in a sign of mourning that I don't sleep in beds. He wouldn't accept their invitation, but he was smart. He once came by and they had a rule that no one's allowed to invite other people to a wedding. So Eliezer came to a wedding and walked into a wedding because he was hungry. He wanted to eat something. Eliezer wasn't Jewish. He can go into a wedding in Sodom and eat something. So he comes into the wedding and the guy sitting next to him says, hey, who are you and who invited you? He says, oh, who invited me? You invited me. Now, the person next to him knew that if he's a local and people would hear that he was the one that invited the guest, they'd be put to death. So the guy ran out of the wedding. You weren't allowed to be hospitable. So when Eliezer said, you invited me, the guy ran out. He didn't want anyone to know that. Then he said next to the next guy. Next guy said, Who invited you? He says, what do you mean you invited me? So the next guy ran home. In 15 minutes, there was no one left at the wedding besides Eliezer, and he was able to sit and eat with no problem. But that's the type of place we're dealing with, right? They had these ridiculous rules where every person in town took care of the cows for each other. But if you didn't own a cow, you had to take care of the city's cows for 2 days instead of one. So if everyone else that owned the cow only took care of the cows for 1 day, you as the one that doesn't own a cow needs to be punished for not owning a cow. So you got to take care of them for 2 days, right? That's the type of individuals we're dealing with. And so I bring you back to my original question. Why did Abraham get involved in this story? Let's look inside now on page 95. We're going to read the verses straight from the verse. The angels got up from there and gazed disparagingly upon Sodom. Abraham went with them to escort them. So Abraham does the greatest mitzvah, which is a separate class. It's not for today. But one of the greatest things you can do when you have a guest, right? In addition to feeding them and giving them what to drink, giving them a place to sleep, biblically, one of the greatest things you can do for a guest is to actually escort them out the door. Escort them, like walk them out to the street, because then they feel like they're actually liked. But if they say, oh, thanks for coming, and then they walk themselves out and someone slams the door behind them, they're like, I'm not sure if that guy really wanted me in their home or not. But if you actually show concern. So Abraham escorts his guest. God said, how could I conceal from Abraham what I'm doing to Sodom in the very land I promised to give him? Since Abraham was mentioned by God, he blessed him. Abraham will become great and powerful nation, and all the nations of the world will be blessed through him. For I have known and cherished him because he instructs his sons and his household after him to keep the way of God, acting with charity and justice. He instructs them to do so in order that God will bring upon Abraham everything he had said he would do for him. So God, while he's at it, he throws in some beautiful reminders of the blessings that he's giving Abraham. And here it gets interesting. Keeping to his word, God said to Abraham, since the outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah has become great, and since their sin has become very grave, I will descend now and see if they have actually caused the outcry which has reached me, then there will be destruction. If not, I will know how to punish them. Meaning, I don't know if I just have to punish them like I punish regular people, with some level of punishment, but not total eradication, or I got to send in the big boys, send in the angels and shut this place down. God says, I don't know. From what I'm hearing, God says, from the cry, from the dead people that are crying to me, from the torture and the death that they've been brought upon them in the city of Sodom and Gomorrah, in that region, I'm guessing that things are looking pretty bad for them. But I got to double check. Before I destroy a place, before I annihilate a place, I need to check. The angels turned from there where Abraham had escorted them and went to Sodom. God was still present before Abraham. Abraham approached God and said, this is before it even happened. Abraham turns to God and says, will you also destroy the righteous with the wicked? So the first thing he does, he goes straight for the juggernaut, boom. God, you're going to destroy the righteous people too? And it wasn't like there was much of a debate here. Abraham goes straight to God and says, I am not going to sit by silently when you're about to take out an entire region in the land that you promised me. You're going to destroy men, women, and children. But I need to understand, are the righteous going too? Perhaps there are 50 righteous men in the midst of the city. Will you destroy it and not spare the place for the sake of the 50 righteous people who are in it? To do such a thing as this, to put to death the righteous with the wicked, equating the innocent to the guilty, would desecrate people's perception of you in the world, and it would desecrate you in the next world. Would the judge of an entire earth not perform true justice? Now, that's a pretty hefty statement to make to God, coming from a guy like Abraham. The same Abraham, by the way, that we're going to read about, took his own 39-year-old son and marched his way to Mount Moriah to sacrifice him because God said so. So Abraham didn't lack faith in God, but perhaps specifically, right? I've always said this, and unrelated to Abraham, related to Abraham, Jeremiah, Esther, Mordechai. Pick your biblical figure, Moses. They all turned to God that way at one point or another. And it doesn't show a lack of faith in God, right? You can't scream at God. You can't express your anger or curiosity with God if you don't believe in him. Atheists and agnostics can't really scream at God. So they're lost, by the way. I would joke with Joe Sharber often, but not just, he's not the only agnostic that I knew well. I know many. It's it's pretty harsh on them. I actually pity. I have a lot of mercy for people that don't believe in God, because when things get tough, there's no one to talk to. Who are you going to talk to? Human beings? Okay. If you're lucky to have a good friend, a good relative, a parent, a child, a sibling, a good friend that maybe could help. But for real pain, for real unanswered questions, for real internal turmoil, if you don't believe in God, you're stuck. Abraham talking to God this way was the greatest affirmation of Abraham's belief in, trust in, and accept it, and Abraham's hope that God would be a God of justice. So he turns to God and says, I can't believe it. You gotta, if you find 50, right? There was 5 villages. Maybe there was 10 in each village that were worthy of being saved. Can't you save the whole place because there are righteous people? What does God respond? God doesn't say, I'm God, get out of here. Don't tell me how to be a judge. I went to law school. I'm on the Supreme Court. I'm the president. I'm the head of Congress. I'm the mayor, the governor, right? The typical human response to anyone that questions their power. Human beings don't like their power being questioned. Quite the contrary. You question their power, they're going to come for you even more. Oh, you're on my hit list now. You embarrassed me. You humiliated me. You questioned my authority. Even 4th grade teachers sometimes get so offended because a 7-year-old questioned their authority. What does God do when Abraham, his chosen Jew, the first Jew, says to God, Aftispa, are you going to destroy the righteous along with the wicked? Would the judge of the entire earth not perform true justice? And God, being God, who doesn't have to have false self-esteem, and doesn't have to have arrogance. God is not arrogant. God says, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous men within the city, I will forgive the entire region of 5 cities for their sake. You got it, my man. You're right, Abraham. I don't want to kill an entire region if I can find 50 people that are worthy of relying on them. So Abraham's not happy now, right? Once you give a finger, he wants a hand. Abraham responded and said, I wish to speak with God. I would be dust and ashes were it not for you. But what if 50 righteous men will be missing 5? Will you destroy the entire city because of the 5? What if there's only 45? You get to divide those 45 up in the city in 5 villages and 5 towns. So it'll be less than 10 in each town. Will you still do it if there's 9 in each town? God says, I will not destroy it even if there's 45. Abraham continued to speak and said, what if the 40 will be founded? God said, I will do it for the sake of the 40. Abraham said, please don't let God's anger be kindled. Let me speak. Now he's already saying, God, I'm going to say one more thing, but please don't get angry at me. What if 30 will be found there? What if there's 30 in the region? Page 99, he said, I will not do it if there are 30 there. Abraham said, please, I want to speak to God. What if 20 will be found there? He said, I will not destroy it for the sake of the 20. Abraham said, please don't let God's anger be kindled and let me speak once more. What if 10 will be found there? Which means now we're down to 2 in each one of the 5 towns. He said, I will not destroy it for the sake of the 10. When he had finished speaking to Abraham, God, the judge, departed. Abraham, the advocate, returned home, but the prosecution remained. The court case was over. The people of Sodom and Amorah, the people of those 5 villages, they got themselves an advocate, a defense attorney, right? They got themselves the Johnny Cochran of spirituality, right? This is the real deal. What was it? Remember by the OJ case, for those that were around, when Johnny Cochran and Dershowitz and Robert Shapiro, and I'm not even a lawyer, Jennifer, but probably 3 of your best legal minds, if you would admit, right? No, somewhat? One at least, okay. You got a lawyer to admit, huh? You got a lawyer to admit that at least one of those 3 attorneys that I just mentioned from my childhood, because I would listen every day to Irene Cornell from CBS 880 in New York. Every day we'd have to hear the update, what's going on in LA, right? He had, when it came to the people of Sodom and Amorah, right, it was a public defendant that was unhired. No one hired him. It's not like the people of Sodom and Amorah knew Abraham. On the contrary, they wanted nothing to do with the Abrahams of the world. Lot, his nephew, who was wicked, went to live with the people of Sodom because he wanted to be with the opposite of whatever everything that Abraham stood for. Abraham had no beef in this, especially because he knew that the angel Raphael, was going to save his nephew. So it wasn't like a family thing, like, okay, God, you got to save the people because my cousins are there. My cousins were going to be saved anyhow. So why did Abraham get involved with a group of people that were cutting people's legs off and putting people with honey on the roof? This is who he should be defending? You ever hear the people say, people in Guantanamo Bay don't deserve a lawyer? Why? Why? By the way, I don't mean to be an expert on military law. I'm just using it as an example. Pick your own criminal of your choice. Everyone deserves that. Everyone deserves to have someone be their advocate, whether it's in a hospital, in a jail, in a school, in life. We all need, or I shouldn't say, we all want advocates. We want people to stand there for us when we're in a tough spot. And if they're articulate and they're wise and brilliant, who could have asked for a better lawyer? The people of Sodom and Amorah, the most wicked of humanity? Maybe if Abraham was the lawyer of the people during the flood, maybe there wouldn't be a flood if they had a lawyer like Abraham. But Abraham, this incredible human being, decides to intervene and use his personal relationship with God. The fact that he was someone that God really paid attention to and treated uniquely, to say, God, justice, baby, justice. 50, 45, 40, 35, well, I didn't know, 30, 20, 10. Till Abraham himself realized, God said, right, God is the judge. I'm out. The party's over. You had your chance. Abraham, the advocate, the lawyer, says, okay, I did my best. I'm out of here. And now the angel Gabriel, has to do his job. And the angel Raphael does his to save Lot's family. Gabriel does his job to destroy the region. But it's something very unique. And that's why I wanted to read the actual verse side. There's something very unique that's transpiring here as it relates to the most righteous person alive at that time and what he was ready to do for the worst people alive at that time. And the words, let me just find it here. It's in Hebrew, but it's on top of page 96. It's Vayigash Avraham Vayoymar. In English, it translates as Abraham approached God. But in Hebrew, it's Vayigash, and the word Vayigash, Hagosha, is really coming. The best translation we have in English for Vayigash is he got in his face. There's no approach. There's a very nice way to say it. We see later in the book of Genesis when Judah is defending his brother Benjamin, who was taken captive by Joseph. Remember when Joseph does the whole mind game with his siblings? Stop this one here. When he does the whole mind game with his siblings. So he takes Benjamin, the baby brother. And that's when Judah says, enough is enough. Judah walks up to Joseph in his face and says, I'm going to take you down. He tells it to the viceroy of the country. So the word over there is Vayigash Yehuda. Judah was Vayigash, got in his face. And here it says Abraham got in God's face and said, will you also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Now the word Vayigash means three things, generally. It means lepius, lemulchama, and letfilah. There's three times the word Vayigash is used. When people are going to war, when people are going to pray, and where people are going to appease. The same word in Hebrew, of Vayigash, which means approach, could either mean approach in the sense of war, I'm getting in your face, or I'm coming to you to appease you, or I'm coming to pray. Abraham over here did all three. He prayed for the people of Sodom. He tried to appease God. What's the first thing he did? The first thing he did was get in God's face. And it's a little odd. Shouldn't you try appeasement first? Shouldn't you try prayer first? No. Get right in God's face and say, God, I was your best guy yesterday. I circumcised myself at 99 years old. I'm ready to take my son in a few hours and take him up to sacrifice him for you. I was thrown into the fiery furnace by Nimrod, the wicked pagan king. I was ready to uproot my entire family at the age of 75 from Haran and march my way to a place you never told me where to go. But suddenly I'm questioning what you're doing. And God could have said, go to hell. I'm God. I'm that fourth grade teacher. You do not question my authority. Do you know who I am? God could have said to them, do you know I created heaven and earth? I can get rid of you in the flick of a finger. You little cockroach that you are, Abraham. How dare you question my infinite wisdom to destroy these wicked people, especially because we know how wicked they are. God doesn't do that, and Abraham doesn't care. Abraham was ready to lose. He was ready to lose whatever it is God could have made him lose because he wanted to defend these people. Because that's what human beings do for other human beings. We can't sit by and watch injustice and say, We had this big debate a few Friday nights ago, Rachel, of how much a person is supposed to get involved in this realm. Here's a way you can get involved in this realm. You can fight for injustice, but you got to fight it the way Abraham did. Talk to God. Say, God, you can't destroy these people. What do you mean, God? God could say, what do you mean? They're wicked. But maybe there's 50 good ones. Right? You know, the Montanans are busy saying California should float away to Mexico. Is there no 50 good people in California? I would venture to say there's majority of wonderful people, vast majority. But we don't think that way anymore. We don't think like Abraham anymore. We lump groups. You're part of that group. What do you mean? Maybe I'm somewhat part of that group, but a little bit not part of that group. But no, we don't have the nuance to be able to differentiate. Abraham could have easily said, hey, you know what? Lot's getting out. Lot's the good guy in his family. That's good enough for me. I'm out of here. God, take it away. Destroy them all. But no. Not only is he ready to stand up for people he doesn't know that may not be deserving of his defense, he's ready to get in God's face for that. What does that tell us about kindness? How far are we meant to go when it comes to kindness and friendship and humanity? You know, earlier this week, on Monday, there was a reporter here, a journalist from New York, that was doing a report for a Jewish, a very successful Jewish YouTube channel. And he was doing a report on Jewish life in Bozeman. As a part of our visits, we went to bring coats to the homeless people near Walmart. It was an incredible experience for me. Mendel was doing it last week. It was the first time I actually went with a stack of coats and gloves and hats. And it was really incredible to see the response from people. And so the journalist was videoing all this. From across the Walmart parking lot, a guy sees us and he screams something. And immediately we thought he was like, paranoid that we were videoing or something. Meanwhile, once I heard what he was saying, it changed everything. He said he was screaming at the YouTube guy. Hey, you're the YouTube guy. He recognized him. And he came running up, gave him a big beer hug. And then we had a whole upbringing going on at the Walmart parking lot. But at the end of it, he was recorded on video, this guy, and he says, so the reporter said to him, what's your message for the world? What do you want to tell my followers? And he said, we have to start loving human beings. We have to start loving our enemies. And then he said something beautiful. He said, we're humankind, which means we're both human and we're both kind. We're supposed to be human and kind. And that's really what Avraham Avinu was teaching us here, not just to be human and kind, but to say, so what if right now the people in this region are wicked? What if there's some good guys and good women there? Are they not worthy of being saved? Can't they change? Don't we believe in repentance and tshuva? Maybe there's 45, maybe 40, 30, 20, 10, there's no hope. Okay, there's no hope. You give up. But you don't give up before you fight for the justice that every human being deserves, before you fight to see the good that exists within every human being. In this talk, what I shared with you tonight about this aspect of the kindness of Abraham fighting is something that I read from the Rebbe from a talk in the fall of 1969. Think of the world in 1969. Think of where the world was and various things that were transpired. That too. And then there was, the late 60s had a lot of different things going on in the world. And the Rebbe addressed and said that when it comes to saving another human being, whether physically from harm, like in the case of Sodom, or spiritually, we can't start calculating, well, is it politically, what's the word I'm looking for, Rachel? No, not politically correct. where you gain something out of it, where we're in the name, it makes sense politically because you're going to gain something out of doing something good, right? Or not gain something, or gain something negative by standing up. There's a word I'm blanking on in the political arena, but political expedience, right? It works for me. I'm going to be good when it works for me. How about being good when it doesn't work for you? How about being good when it may ruin your reputation to stand up for the good person? Or to stand up for goodness, even when the rest of the world, the mob, the whole world is saying, trafe, 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 and you're supposed to come here and defend the guy? I remember a couple of years ago, must have been 3 summers ago, there was an individual here in Montana that was being labeled as an anti-Semite. And I knew firsthand that it's a lie because I knew the person. I knew that this person did not have an anti-Semitic bone in their body. And I said to that person that day, I said, I want you to know that today would have been the easiest day to throw you under the bus and just say, yes, you're an anti-Semite, because everyone was saying it. For me to say the opposite meant I'm going against what everyone was saying. But I said, I don't do that because there's truth in this world. And even though right now it may be convenient for me to say that, when it's not true, it's not true. We stand with goodness even when it's hard. Abraham knew to stand up for goodness even when not all the people in that city deserved it. And he not only did he stand up, he got in God's face. And for that, you got to give credit. None of us want to get in God's face. Most of us come to ask God for things for ourselves. And we do so timid, with timidity. I may not deserve it, God. If you don't mind, sneak me in a little blessing there. I come Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. I know I'm not perfect, God, but maybe you can still sneak me in. But for someone else, I should get involved with someone else. When it came to God testing Abraham, he never flinched. He followed every test God gave him. Fiery furnace, slaughter my son, circumcision. But it comes to another human being. At that point, when you're dealing with another human being, it's not your job to accept it for what it is. Your job is to stand up and say, I want justice. Even if you may not win the justice, doesn't mean you should fight for the justice. I didn't say that the criminals should get out of prison because they have good lawyers, but still doesn't mean they shouldn't have a good lawyer that gives them the best shot they have to prove their innocence, or at least to prove that they're not guilty. And so we as a society, we as Abraham's children, need to learn from Abraham to fight for justice even when we're not sure if the people we're fighting for deserve it. So you say to yourself, why? Because they're God's children, they're human beings. And human beings deserve for us to stand up for them. And that's a tough thing for people to swallow, because we tend to see everything in black and white, right? What did Bush say back then? Either you're with us or against us, and we'll smoke you out of your pits, or something to that effect. I was 20 years old, so I feel like I'm an old person. I'll smoke, right? Either you're with us or against us. Either you're harboring terrorists, or you're something like that. I don't remember. I learned Talmud by heart. I don't memorize George W. Bush's statements by heart, but it was something to that effect. But that's not true. What if the people harboring negative people have another ulterior motive for whatever their reasons are, right? No one said our country has it all figured out perfectly. We make mistakes too. And we do things for our own political expedience, so there's other countries doing things for their political expedience. All right, who's right about Afghanistan? Russia or America? Don't even try to answer. None of us know the answer to that, nor do I. It was very rhetorical. My point was only is that it's easy to sit on your couch and judge half the world. Abraham chose the opposite. He said, I'm going to sit on my couch, but I'm going to fight for half the world. I'm going to fight for them. I'm going to perhaps shine a light on the good. It turns out in Abraham's case, there was no good to shine on. And it could be with other human beings. You may find that conclusion too. You've tried, but you got to at least try. And when you know that you're seeking truth, is that when you recognize you said or did something wrong about another group, you don't stick to your story. I was having this conversation with someone the other day about this whole Columbus versus Indigenous Peoples Day. I'm like, I'm not here to disagree with you that Columbus may have done some wrong things along the way. By all means, I don't. If you look at anyone's life, especially someone that did that much and was that much of a public figure, you're going to find a lot of stuff you're not going to like. Pick a president, pick a prime minister, pick a human being. But you can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. You can't say that Columbus didn't do anything good. I'm pretty sure I'm proof that he did. When Jews needed a place to come to New Amsterdam before New York, the Portuguese shul in New Amsterdam, where do you think they went? You can't, only God knows every detail. And only God can say, well, in retro, the rest of us, pipe down. You don't know everything. You're going to find out things you're not going to like. That doesn't mean that everything about the person is bad. And that is a key lesson from Abraham's life. He didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk. He went up to bat. He went to bat with God over a group of people he didn't know, nor, according to our society standards, should he even have cared about. He cared about them for one simple reason. They were human beings. And that's all that mattered. Jackie Mason used to joke back in the day about how when Walter Cronkite would share the news, you could catch a reporter shedding a tear when they were reading about, 300 people died in Sri Lanka from a tsunami. He says, today, people that dress up, they put on makeup on them, they stick them in front of a screen. 2,000 people died over here, 4,000 people died over there, 6,000 people died over there. We move on. And the weather tomorrow in San Francisco. Where's the humanity? Every one of those reports, even if it was two, even if it was one. Why does it take a catastrophe of hundreds of thousands or millions and suddenly people care? What about when it's a few? What about when it's one? And that is the key that Abraham was teaching us. Let's never lose our humanity. When we do, we've lost it all as a society. And we've seen a lot of that. And none of us deserve to be part of or live in a world where our politics or our choices or our affiliations are more important than our humanity. I don't need to agree with you. Actually, most of the time, I don't even want to agree with you. It looks bad. I told the rabbi the other day, we were having a rabbinic debate on one of the rabbi forums. I said, you're now in big trouble because I just agreed with you in public. Now they're going to say, oh, you and Chaim agree. What does that mean? Right? But where's our humanity? Where's the 3-second pause to say, maybe there's another story there? And if you ever don't believe that that's possible, I'm going to recommend something I've never recommended before. Go to Walmart, spend 10 minutes with some homeless people, and you'll find out that each one of them has an incredible story. I was only there for an hour, and it was life-altering. Mendel was there for a few hours, and he told me clearly it made an incredible difference. These are real people with families. Some of them are unfortunately not in contact with their real people. Let's be the Abraham and Sarah. Let's be those fighting for justice, but also caring about other human beings. Have a fantastic week. Shavua Tov. We'll see you back here. What's next Wednesday? I'm probably going to be in Great Falls next Wednesday night, so I may be broadcasting from Great Falls. I don't think it'll be in person, Jennifer. I hereby I have to be up in the High Line for a bunch of days with some work, but there will be class next Wednesday night by hook or by crook or by brook, but we will be back here, right? You never heard that one, right? We'll be back here next week. Shalom, Shavuot. And any questions, you're welcome to send. Again, in 10 days, we're starting our new course, Outsmarting Anti-Semitism. If you want a link, send me a text or a Facebook message, and I will send you the link where to sign up for that class. 4 weeks during lunch hour, Outsmarting Anti-Semitism, a new way to look at it. Sei gesund, and we'll see you soon. Go ahead, Jennifer.
What do you mean?
So maybe you had a question.
No, I do. Why are you so antsy tonight? You're not usually so antsy. Everything okay?
Yeah.
Why are you so antsy, Chaya?
You okay?
What?
That was a good quote, by the way. That was a good video. Talk about some people caught with their pants down.
What did Ben and Jerry's do in Afghanistan?
That's the one thing.
Good evening, Ruth. Erev Tov, Margot, and Hagai.
Erev Tov.
Good night.
Yalla tov.
Enjoy your heat.
Oh, yeah, we will.
Thank you for the lesson.
My pleasure.